evening, everybody. Happy to be here. My name is Heli Berna. As mentioned, I will be your host tonight for this third and sadly the last session of this podcast organized by BarBichette and Coeurtisol. I'm very happy that Alexia pronounced already the full name of our guest tonight because I tried having a little rehearsal with him. It didn't go very well, did it, Valentin? No.
It's all right. I'm used to my name being butchered, and I take no offense.
Very happy to be here. And before we dive into any questions, I will just introduce our guest. So Valentin is an expert in communications, as well as organizational development. Currently, he works at the College of Europe as Director of External Relations, Communications and Events. And prior to that, he used to be the head of unit at the European Green Party, amongst many other things. So for those who are a bit confused at this moment, can you tell us, what does an expert in communications and organizational development do? What does a day in your life at work look like?
That's a complicated question because I have a very, very diverse job, especially at the College of Europe, my full-time job. The expert in communication is fairly straightforward in the end. Especially at the College of Europe, I need to attract, interesting, diverse students. We need to ensure we get good partners for the College of Europe. We need to ensure the reputation of the College of Europe is high among our partners, also to ensure the high employability of our students. And from this, I define a comm strategy, and with my team, we implement a comm strategy. So that's the comms part. In a university like the College of Europe, it's fairly, I would say, straightforward. In my previous job at the Green Party, it was a bit more complicated. We can come back to that later because this is part of the difficulties of the work life in Brussels. And the organizational development, it's more my past life. I was director of a youth network, the Young European Federalists before, and I'm advising different NGOs as well on their organizational strategies.
So very impressive CV in any case. I stalked you a bit on LinkedIn as well. How did you end up in this career path? In a way that, like, how much was it personal experiences with toxicity at work, or just external interest, or seeing any specific situations? Just maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that, how you ended up.
I never planned to end up in the Eurobubble. I studied sports management, which has not much to do with what I'm doing now.
Okay.
And my first job was to organize the European Universities Badminton Championship. Badminton is the sport I play, and my local university sport association was selected to organize this European Championship, and the coach, who was also the organizer, asked me, okay, you're back from your Erasmus, you speak some English, you know badminton, do you want a part-time job to organize this event? And that was my first job there in my hometown in Nancy in France. I moved then to Slovenia, where the European University Sport Association is, and I worked in the field of sport for a few years. But then, in the meantime, I was volunteering for ESN, the Erasmus Student Network, that probably some of you know, this network of student associations in Europe that are mainly known for the parties they organize for Erasmus students, but that's really a small part of what they do. They are super well organized as a network, and especially here at the European level, they are lobbying for the rights of international students, for more money for Erasmus, for more accessibility for Erasmus Plus to all students. And I got involved in this network. I was president of my local section, but at some point they took me to Brussels and they started to ask my opinion about political stuff regarding Erasmus Plus, and I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing here, but I enjoy it. And I realized I enjoyed giving my opinion to European decision makers. Mm-hmm. And at some point I was like, maybe I could also make it my job. And especially because I love Brussels, I was coming 10, 15 times per year to Brussels as a volunteer for ESN. Like, maybe I just want to move here. And I ended up finding a job in another youth organization, the Young European Federalists, as the Secretary General. So instead of being a volunteer for an organization, I suddenly got paid to do the same thing in Brussels, which was sort of a perfect situation for me. So that's what took me to Brussels.
Okay, that sounds like a like a very ideal parcours so far. I was a bit worried there when you said they took me to Brussels. What happened there, Valentin? But okay. You already mentioned a little bit the Eurobubble. Recently with Jobs in Brussels, there was a survey that was done on the well-being within the Eurobubble. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Mostly about what were some of the results? Because I don't think it's out yet. Is it out?
No, the results are not out for the main reason that I'm procrastinating analyzing the data. Okay. So I still have now quite a bunch of data and I'm just too lazy to actually dive into it.
Thank you for your honesty.
But I can take just a little step back of also why this reflection on well-being at work and that, you know, long way down the road led to this survey. It's very personal that about 10 years ago, a bit more, I was in this transition between, you know, still these volunteering activities and the need to find a real job. And I started wondering, okay, what's a good job? Because it was like, okay, I'm volunteering, it's fun, but at some point I will need to make some compromise. And I Googled, you know, what's a good job? And at that time, I mainly found like, okay, good salary, enough holidays, period. And I was like, not satisfied. And I started asking around. And I came up with this 26 criteria of what define a good job. From do you have good equipment to is it in a good region, or do you have good colleagues? Do you have autonomy and so on? And since then, I could not stop asking myself at every moment of my life, like, am I having a good job? Am I enjoying? Are my criteria well fulfilled? And I also realized like a lot of people are not asking these questions to themselves quite often. They sort of take for granted that they need to suffer a little bit in their job, which I'm like, I want to be happy. I want to be joyful. I'm gonna, and most of my days are gonna be spent, you know, working. So I might as well try to figure out what makes me happy. And then I started sharing this thought, and people sort of reacted positively to them, but also realizing most of them have a lot of issues in their job. And so, yeah, a few years passed, and then at some point we decided, maybe we can study a bit more in the Eurobubble. What's this relationship to well-being at work and satisfaction with your job? So I took my 26 criteria and I completely not scientifically created some questions with, 30, 40 questions, and we put it out there. And I think in a month we got about 600 respondents to the survey from all the sectors. And in terms of what data we have, we know already that overall in Brussels, in the Eurobubble, people are quite happy with their jobs. That's maybe a first conclusion. People are not miserable, which is not too surprising because it's a place where I think in majority people choose to be. So you choose your job there. It's not a completely, the job that is not forced on you. People are very happy, I think, with the meaning of their job, with the value behind their jobs, because it's a value-based city. Like even if you work for some, things that I would consider being evil, like, I don't know, the tobacco industry, you probably choose to work there. So you still, for you, it's still a value-based job. But then we also realize that people are very unhappy and unsatisfied with mainly the support they receive. The support from their HR departments, which in a lot of organizations in Brussels are just non-existent. I mean, the small organization, they don't have an HR department. The mental health support, insufficient. We realize also people cannot disconnect from their jobs. Everybody's answering that they keep thinking about their jobs all the time. These are the first sort of main results that we saw.
Okay. And if I can just ask, just to be clear, when we say Eurobubble, who were the people answering this survey? Like in which sectors or organizations or?
So institutions, NGOs, consultancies, lobbying, the whole sort of institution plus the usual ecosystem around. Okay. An overrepresentation of NGO, civil society in the answers, which I think is biased because of my own networks. That was the primary network, but quite a nice balance still.
Okay, and were there any surprises? Because I guess you just mentioned the sort of the results that were not surprising, but anything that stood out?
So far, I think nothing that was not expecting. I think overall in the end, the overall job satisfaction being quite high was in the end a positive surprise. No, there is one thing, is also the lack of clarity, and this is something we can talk a bit about later in in the podcast, the lack of clarity regarding the success criteria of one's job. Like people essentially don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they are supposed to do at the end of the line, you know, like I don't know, if I'm a comms person, I know I have to produce communication output, like I don't know, a tweet, and I know that then I want my tweet to be seen by as many people as possible, but that's not the end. Like what's next? Like what is the impact of my tweet? And I think a lot of people are very unclear with this sort of final impact that what they're supposed to do. And still with comms, I think it's very straightforward, but there are categories of job where it's much less clear.
Yeah, so like a disconnection with the direct result outcome. You also actually, when we were preparing, you mentioned the book. It was an article, I think, and then became a book. The bullshit jobs. Can I say bullshit? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I'm definitely going to say bullshit, and probably not only about this book, but about other things later on as well. Yes, it's something that if you haven't read it, so it's called On the Phenomenon of Bullshit Jobs. It's a fairly short article written in 2013 or 12, I'm not sure, by David Graeber, an anthropologist, and he was basically offered to write on this sort of left-wing website about anything, and he wrote about bullshit jobs, so jobs that are sort of bringing no value to society, but surprisingly are very present and usually very well rewarded. And he got such reaction. He received thousands of testimonies from people going from a few paragraphs to 10 pages, that he had pure research material from the answers to this article, that he wrote a book called Bullshit Jobs, a Theory. And this really resonated with me. And this is when I was saying, you know, I want to be happy and I want to know what I'm doing. This is basically, this article is always in the back of my mind. Like, how do I make sure that I do not have a bullshit job? Like, how do I make sure I have a job that contributes to something for society? And how can I sort of measure it? I don't need to be able to, you know, have the tools to measure if I have an impact, but I need to know that in theory I could. And I think this is a lot of people are just not asking themselves this question. Okay.
When is your book coming out, Valentin?
My book. I should copy paste all my stupid LinkedIn posts and probably can make a book out of this, but it would not be very interesting. But.
Great. So you've also volunteered with a lot of civil society organizations, as you mentioned, and you already talked about the survey now, that it was between NGOs as well and the institutions. But were there any trends that you noticed in the satisfaction or dissatisfactions that were maybe more in the NGO world, more in the institution world, or is it really just...
so far, no. So I did start to play with the data a bit, and one of the first things I wanted to look at is, from the answers I have, and despite this sort of overrepresentation of the NGO sector, I wanted to check if there is any sort of correlation between the sector you're working and some of the satisfaction or dissatisfaction criteria. And there was no statistically visible difference in the data I have. Like I could not identify a trend where, I don't know, like people working at the commission are miserable and where people in NGO are super happy. No, there was no, or yeah, I mean, obviously there were like people in the institutions are a bit more satisfied with their salaries, but this is, you know, like this is not, this is like this, you don't need a survey to come up to that, to come to this conclusion. But otherwise in really satisfaction and well-being, it seemed to be pretty the same across sectors.
Okay. So moving on a little bit, and I was also wondering from your own work life, whether volunteering or when you started, you know, already paid jobs, etc. Were there any sort of hardships that you came across? Well, I'm sure there were. And can you perhaps, or not in your own experience, even somebody else's, but maybe give like some examples of what felt like was a good way that an employer handled the situation, and what might have been a bad way that someone handled the situation?
Yeah, I think first I have to say I've been mainly lucky. I worked and volunteered. I had a lot of short experiences. So I worked and volunteered in a lot of different organizations. I mean, I think my job life was mainly 1 year experiences here and there. And overall, I was super lucky. I think out of 10 or more different organizations for which I've worked, there was only, I think, 2 that I would really call negative experiences. All the rest was really positive. And my current job now, I think I'm super lucky where I am. It's a really sort of positive, empowering workplace, so that's super nice. I have a former team member of mine in the audience here, so if I'm bullshitting too much, you can call me out afterwards. But yeah, I had specifically 2 work experiences that I would really call toxic in a way or another. One was like direct crazy micromanagement, where I was hired with already a certain level of seniority, and on the first week I was asked to print a draft email that was supposed to send to an inconsequential partner. I was asked to print the draft email, and the boss put handwritten comments on my draft email and put it back on my desk. The handwritten comments made no sense, and that was like first week a massive red flag. I didn't stay long in this organization. I ended up with a sort of like weird burnout where not the workload or anything, but the absurdity of the situation. One day I spent 5 hours in front of my computer, not like paralyzed, not being able to do anything. And on that day I said, okay, I need to get out of here. So there it was just like really pure weird micromanagement. And then the other experience was in the Eurobubble as well, but in the political environment where the lack of clarity was really draining, where at some point I asked to a leadership person, okay, can you help me define the success criteria for my job? And the answer I got was, well, the success criteria is to make the president and the secretary general happy. And I'm like, yeah, this cannot lead to any healthy work environment, because when your leaders are political leaders and you try to make them happy, this doesn't work. I mean, this cannot work. Their mood keeps on changing, and they don't have a clear compass, and then therefore making them happy is impossible. So when I heard this, I also decided to change the job I had at that time. So these were the bad experiences, and then because I think your question was also about like positive stuff and how like situations were handled. I think in general, I've had mainly empowering bosses, people who give trust and try to help you do your job and are not controlling everything you do. So overall, I've had positive experiences.
Okay, yeah. My question came from the fact that I think it's impossible to be in a work environment where sometimes there's not going to be difficulties or conflicts or misunderstandings. Why not? But they can be handled in a good way, and it can. That's sort of where I was looking at, because if you have a boss like you mentioned who is micromanaging you, was there a way to say that to them and kind of make them realize to maybe tone it down?
I don't think so, because when you have a boss that is micromanaging you, you probably realize that this person is also toxic in other ways, and you probably do not dare, or at least that was my situation. You don't feel you are in a safe position to bring these things. Like in my current job and in some of my previous jobs, I felt like there was this empowering environment where it was clear that it was like no bullshit, and the feedback can go two-way. And if you have something to tell me as an employee to me as a boss, you feel safe enough to say it. And it's all about creating this safe space, which is not rocket science, but I think this is 90% of a healthy work environment is the boss actively creating a safe space, basically.
And maybe then to also continue on that, because you mentioned it, that one of the issues seems to be that in many environments there's no existing really HR support. So, for example, in this kind of situation, if it's between an employee and employer, you can't talk about that. Like there should be a third party that comes in, I guess. How can organizations sort of assure that?
Well, I think first in Brussels, especially, I mean, in the Eurobubble, especially in the civil society sector, there's a lot of organizations that are too small anyways, that have like no HR services at all. I mean, when I was the SecGen of Jeff Europe, the Young European Federalist, I was the HR director, I was the finance director, I was the many people who have worked in small NGOs, they know very well
Yes.
this feeling of having all the hats,
familiar.
and you do not have the chance to have a third party, a mediator or anything as HR. And I think in Brussels, it's also specifically a problem because it's a city of expertise where people are here because of their political topics. They want to be expert in what they do, but they do not care about management. People's management, HR, is not seen as a prestigious thing, so people don't want to think about it. So you have a lot of people who are thrown into these managerial positions, leadership positions, because of their political expertise or policy expertise on the topic, but are never, they don't want to think about how they're going to manage people. They're not offered support when they become leaders. And this creates this sort of not actively toxic work environment, but de facto toxic because the people are just not ready to have these positions. So I think that's and I feel in organization where there are HR departments, it means they are big organizations, and sometimes they're just too remote or do not have the capacity. Quite often in Brussels, the HR departments are just too small to help their managers as well.
Yes, well, it sounds very, very familiar. I come from the NGO sector myself as well. So you touched upon it a little bit already, and you kind of mentioned what were the certain toxic situations in your work life, and seems like you were quite aware of the red flags and got out. But indeed, for some people, it's very difficult to sort of make that decision of, is this a toxic situation or not? And especially, I think, since COVID, lives have changed a lot, workplace, everything has changed. So what would be the red flags and the green flags at the same time when someone is looking for a job or has started a new job? So good things to look out for when applying, and certain things that you can already tell from a job ad and say, no, not even going to go there.
Here I need to look at my notes. I wrote down a few bullet points, but I need to cheat here a bit. I think the first thing is something I already partly mentioned, is this question of clarity of what you're expected to do. If in a job description, is there any form of success criteria for the job? Do you know against which criteria you're going to be judged, evaluated during after 6 months? How can you tell, or how can you ask a boss, am I successful? If it's not immediately clear in the job description, well, maybe it's, it should trigger some question that you should ask during, let's say, a job interview. And on the other hand, a green flag is the clarity of expectations. Do you know what you are expected to do in terms of outputs? What you need to actually produce? Do you know what these outputs are supposed to trigger in terms of direct outcomes? I don't know. Again, I'm taking the example of comms because it's the one I'm dealing with on a daily basis. I want my team to. I don't put sort of quantitative criteria to my team, but I'm okay, we should have regular communication on our channels, and therefore, as an outcome, we should grow our followership on our channels. It is something I can give them as a compass. I don't give them quantitative KPIs because it doesn't make sense, but at least it's a sufficient compass. And then at the end of the line, are we attracting more and more quality candidates at the College of Europe? This is a final impact that my team can contribute to. And again, we don't put quantitative final KPIs. It would not make any sense, but at least it's a sufficient compass. Can you see that in the job description? If you can, that means you will have this clear compass. I think very related to that is, and this you cannot probably see in the job description, but more if you have an interview, are they going to focus on the output, the outcomes, or are they going to focus on the process, how many hours you spend in the office? I'm still surprised of how many, we take it for granted for some of us, that we should focus fully on, the output, the outcomes, and the impact of the work. But so many organizations are still focusing on the process. You need to be in your office from 9 to 5. Again, for my job and for my team, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It makes sense to be in office because sometimes we have events and we need to interact with colleagues and we need to interact with students, and therefore we need to be there for a specific reason related to the outputs. But being there from 9 to 5 makes zero sense. So seeing how an organization approaches this question of, do you still need to be in office for the sake of being in office? I think these days it's one of the easiest red flag to spot. The clarity of the management structure, I think, is also quite often underdeveloped in job description. I think there is a very good example of a very good practice, if I remember correctly, is the jobs at Client Earth, this big climate litigation NGO. I think on their career page and on the job description, they explain very clearly who's going to be your manager, who are going to be your key relationship. So providing clarity even before, these are usually questions you would ask during a job interview, but they provide it at the level of the job description, which is very reassuring to know how this is going to work. The learning and support system as well. So, I think in our bubble, we have this need to constantly learn, update our knowledge, update our skills, and so many organizations are not taking care of that. And if you know that if they clearly, at the level of the job description, explain how you will be encouraged to learn, that they dedicate, a budget or that they dedicate time for you to learn, this is a very, very good green flag. On the side of red flag, of course, the clarity and transparency on the salary. This is a constant battle. I mean, this is the obvious one, but so many jobs are still mentioning nothing or mentioning a competitive salary. I mean, if your salary is competitive, why is it not indicated there? And all the side benefits. I know in Belgium, it's famously unclear the structure of your salary and all the benefits. And if an organization manages to make this clear for you, it's also usually a good sign.
Thank you for that. I see a lot of the audience members nodding every time when you speak. So it's good that we're all on the same page here. And so moving on to the next part, which again, you've touched upon a few things from there. There are also currently a lot of generational kind of gaps and differences in opinion, if I may say so. Oftentimes Gen Z is called snowflakes and that they're not very resilient anymore, etc. At the same time, you can say that some older generations, I don't know where I stand in there, but okay, that they are trivializing perhaps the toxicity and the symptoms of toxicity at work. So where do you see let's say the issues, or who is right in there? And did that also come out in the survey in some way?
All right. Can we stay until midnight to talk about this?
I can.
No. The first thing that you should do once we're done here is you go on Google, specifically Google Image,
yes.
And you Google "nobody wants to work anymore." And then you will see this media clips from, I think, still from the end of the 19th century.
Yeah.
And every 10 years, you have headlines in the media that the new generation doesn't want to work anymore. So, of course, when we're told that the Gen Z doesn't want to work anymore, this is bullshit. This every generation has. Probably for the previous generation, I didn't want to work as well. Mm-hmm. But yet, I think there is a generational change. I'm an exact mid-millennial. I was born in 1987, so that makes me mid-millennial. And I can already see, of course, some different approaches to work with the youngest members of my team, or the most junior people I recruit. Which I think is because of the broader understanding of what is a good job. I think there are these 26 criteria that I use for myself of what is a good job. I think it's more naturally integrated in their relationship to work. And therefore, if, let's say, me as a more classic millennial, I think about, or let's say my parents' generation as a boomer generation, think way more about salary and holidays as the only criteria to analyze your job. And the new generation has way more of a broader understanding of what is a good job and quality and work-life balance and so on. Of course, the generational gap is going to appear because you're not analyzing your job reality with the same set of criteria. I think the relationship to learning, the relationship to autonomy, the relationship to flexibility, and it can create this generational clash or this impression that people don't want to work. No, they want a job with an impact. They want work that adds value to society. They want work. They just don't care only about salary and holidays. I mean, I'm simplifying. I'm creating a bit of a black and white picture, but I think it's more of this different perspective on how you analyze a job. And I think it's also because of a broader understanding of what is work. I think for still the vast majority of society and way more for the previous generation, work was paid employed work. And volunteer work, care work, especially for women, what's called also reproductive work, so the chores, I mean work that allows other people to do their work, all this was not considered. And now there is, I mean, a rightful trend from the new generation to say, okay, like this is also work. Like if I have to spend time at home because I want to empower my partner to have a better career, this is also work that I'm doing. Volunteer work should also be, I mean, so many people are contributing way more to society by their volunteer work rather than other people who that paid work, and yet it's not the same recognition. So I think there's also this way broader understanding. If I could, I think some days I would want to work 15 hours per week, and the rest of I would dedicate another 15 hours to do volunteer work, and I think I would be at least equally or more valuable to society, and yet I cannot do this. So I think this general difference of understanding of the good job criteria and what is work create this generational clash. But of course, I don't believe that the new generation doesn't want to work less. I mean, they're not lazy.
No. Maybe as well talk about one big thing that is mentioned a lot is burnout and burnout prevention. Can you talk a little bit more about that in the sense of what can burnout actually be prevented when there's already internal issues, and what really should be burnout prevention in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm qualified. I'm not a psychologist. I mean, my mom is a psychologist, but that doesn't make me a psychologist. But I've tried to think a bit about one thing that I've tried to think about is why Brussels, I mean, the Eurobubble, is maybe a more risky environment regarding burnout than some other environments, and what makes the Eurobubble a bit unique in certain ways. And some of the criteria that I mean, they can be debated because they're also completely unscientific. But one, it's a city of quite young expats. So let's say you're a junior professional, you come from Spain, your family is in Spain, you studied in Spain, your friends are in Spain, and you move to Brussels and you start working. And suddenly your work is not going well and it's super intense, and you are what do you do? If you were back home, you would go a few evenings per week to your mom and get a warm meal, and you would have your first line of support would be your parents. But then you're in Brussels, you're uprooted from your life there, and so you do not have this easy first line of support as compared to if you stay back home. Then it's a value-based city where people have they are very invested in their jobs. Their jobs are their whole identity quite often. You have so many people in Brussels who they only have their job. They have their job. They go for beers with their friends from work. They don't have any hobbies outside of their Eurobubble job, and that is also creating bigger risk because then your whole identity is your job. If your job doesn't go well, your whole identity is at risk. While let's say in my case, I'm a badminton player. I play badminton. So I do bird watching and mushroom picking. So if my job is not going well, I still have these other parts of my identity to feel good. And so the fact that it's this one identity value-based city when you only have your job. So for people to do other things than their job, I think is very important. Another criteria that I already mentioned is this lack of consideration for management. So you have these people with a lot of expertise on their topic, and they become managers, and they don't know how to take care of people, which creates, I think, a risk for burnout when you don't know how to take care of your people. It's another thing is it's a very small bubble. I think if you are in London or Paris, it's easier to be a bit anonymous, and if something doesn't go well in your own bubble, you can go somewhere else, find another sub bubble. In Brussels, there is literally only the Eurobubble. If it's the only for expat, for this international community, it's the Eurobubble. So if this doesn't go well in this environment, what do you do? Like you cannot find. It's not a city of 10 million people with different sectors. It's really this or nothing basically. So I think, and these are a bit unique to Brussels, and that creates an extra risk for this question of burnout. So I think this is something to keep in mind for people working in the bubble here.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's definitely very on point. I guess we could say then that maybe when hiring in this EU bubble sectors, that's also something to take into consideration when you're hiring new people, perhaps to offer them as well more of this social support in a way as well. We are out of time, I believe. So, yeah, time flies when you're having fun. But thank you so much, Valentin, for speaking to us, for giving your expertise. Any last words? Wait, sorry, I do have a question. What are those 26 criteria you keep mentioning, and where can we find them?
I wish I had a book to sell or something, but no, the only thing I have to sell is for free. Is you can go on my blog. I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I put the articles, the links to the article on my blog, and it's this very old article I wrote in 2014 with the 26 criteria, which I clustered in different categories. I also created a template for a matrix that if you are uncertain about your job, you duplicate the matrix and you can put the 26 criteria in a double axis, like how well the criteria is fulfilled. So let's say salary, are you not happy at all or very happy? And then the other axis is how important this criteria is for you. So I don't care about the salary because I don't spend money, or I care a lot about the salary. And then you have, in the end, because you have two axes, you have 4 quadrants. So a very important criteria that is fulfilled. So you want a maximum of criteria there.
Yeah.
The very important criteria where you're not fulfilled. So that the big red flag. So let's say, salary is super important for you, but you're really unhappy with your salary. Well, maybe you need to find another job. And then, so you can analyze your job with this matrix, which I think is quite a nice and easy tool to reflect. So maybe the last words for me is just like, think about where you are at the moment. Think about what you actually want to do. What makes you happy and satisfied in a work day, in a work week. Like not where you want to be in 20 years in terms of career or power or salary in 20 years. No, think about what is going to make you happy for the next 1 day, 6 months, 1 year, in terms of this criteria. And in Brussels, we're usually in the Eurobubble, all highly educated people with a lot of skills and competencies and knowledge. And so we have the privilege to quite often have the choice of our job. It's not always easy. I'm speaking in a place of privilege where I know I have support systems. I can stop for a while, I can change. It's not the case for everybody, but if you do have this privilege of being able to choose your job and change, do reflect if you are at the good place and if you are actually happy with what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Valentin. We will take questions now or testimonials, anything our audience members would like to say. Just, I guess, raise your hand and I'll pass you the mic. And I think we also might have some anonymous questions. So anybody want to ask something, say something? No. Yes, please.
I can do like this. Hello. Football player, I can do it. Or like this. Thanks. I have a practical question. You were talking about job interviews and job descriptions a lot. Do you have some practical advice on what to ask in a job interview to spot the green flags?
Good question. I was at the beginning of your question. I was like, oh yeah, I can answer that. I have a blog article about this, but I have a blog article in general about what question to ask in a job interview as a candidate. But I never really thought about this. But I think this would be around these green flag, red flag criteria that I mentioned. I think I would ask, okay, can you let's say you hire me. In 6 months, how can you tell that I'm successful? And if they start, blabbering some stuff that makes no sense, red flag. If they can give you some, not, purely quantitative criteria, but at least some type of a compass that you think can help you do your job, I think that's good. Asking about, hey, what how do you train, or how do you consider training and learning and development for your staff members, and seeing, if they answer, we do have a budget for everyone, we do dedicate, Belgian law allows you to do 5 days of trainings, and we do encourage our people to do these 5 days, green flag. So yeah, I think also, how do you, how will I be managed? Is there any performance reviews regularly, and who is leading these? So a bit of the, understanding the management to understand that you're not completely left alone or micromanaged. The other thing to do is, I mean, it's a bit more difficult, but it's having the opportunity to talk to some of the team members, the other people, in the organization. So asking, in case you offer me the job, would I be able to have a quick chat with some of the colleagues, for example? I mean, it's a two-way process, but again, this is talking from sometimes a bit of a place of privilege and safety. I don't know, if I were to look for a job now, I'm not. I'm in a long-term job, super stable, so I could afford to not find. So I know that some of these advice is not easily applicable for everyone. But
yeah, but I mean, if I may add, I like always to think about it in the way some people say that, it's not just them interviewing you, it's you interviewing them as well. Also, if somebody still has questions but they don't want to ask it live, we will stick around afterwards to have more chats. So do not feel discouraged. But so far, anyone want to say something, add any?
I mean, if the job environment is really toxic, and if the person is if it's really in terms of mental health, if it's harmful, then that person should go on a burnout leave. And the Belgian system is quite supportive for burnouts as compared to other countries. It's and this I speak from first-hand experience. I mean, it's a supportive system. So if because of this environment you really cannot do your job because your mental health is affected, you should not be afraid to accept it for yourself, and in a way, do not feel like that you are abusing the system. If your mental health is suffering, I would encourage a person to take sick leave. I mean, because if you drag it, even if you feel that your mental health is slowly decreasing, but you sort of can still do your job, this is not a good process, because too many people, especially I think here it's probably more people in the NGO sector, who sort of, they feel they should do their job until the last drop of energy they have. And no, once you're able to recognize that your mental health is dropping, and that is because of your job, and you cannot change your job environment, then you should leave. Because if you wait longer, it's going to get worse and worse, and then it's going to take way longer to recover, and this is not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for the employer. It's not going to be good for society in general. It's not persevering in a toxic environment where your mental health is being affected is not good for anyone. And that's why also the Belgian system is fairly supportive. I mean, they recognize that, you should not stay in this situation longer. So maybe accepting this, and I know for younger professionals, for professionals in the civil society sector, it's very hard to accept. But knowing that you have the support system of the Belgian system, I think should encourage you to take this sick leave, and to not take a 1 week sick leave thinking okay, I'm going to get better after a week. This is also this is the most common mistake for people who are just on the verge of burnout or already there but do not recognize it. They take a week and then they come back, and then it gets even worse, because that was absolutely not to recover from a burnout. If you are really in a burnout, this is several months. And you have no other option. It's not the short-term feeling of having stopped for a week that, I feel better. This is a lie you're telling yourself, basically. And then about finding another job, I think also when you are in a better place mentally, in terms of mental health, if you take a break, I think it's also easier to look for a job and apply. But I don't know if I have more practical advice there.
Yeah, no, that was a very good question and great answer. I totally agree, because you need that space and time to kind of recover. And I do, again, coming from the sector that I'm in, I've also seen that when you're a little bit already in that moment and in that situation, you might actually go and look for a job, but only take a job just to get out of the previous situation. But it might not actually get better when you start the new job. And another advice, I guess, go and read the 26 criteria by Mr. Valentin and and put together your matrix. Yes, we have another question. Great.
Hi. I don't know if it's a question or more a commentary in terms of the NGO sector, because you were saying you got a lot of responses in your survey from people who work in civil society in Brussels, etc. The sense that also a lot of people kind of are very passionate about why they are in that sector, in NGOs, and it links to their values, their vision of the world. And so even though sometimes it's like I'm working too much, but then even if there are people around them who are saying, no, okay, let's stop this, let's put priorities, you can not overdo it, etc. There's like a sense of like, I'm so passionate about it. And so burnout happens anyway, or burnout in that job. And I don't know if that's something that you have advice on for people who are experiencing kind of the challenge of like, there is a supportive system around you, and good managers. I've had experience of very good managers, but I was still overdoing it because the passion, the kind of never-ending goal of like I'm trying to end patriarchy, and it basically never ends. And at the end of the workday, patriarchy is still around, so it's like it never ends. So I was wondering if you had any advice on people who kind of feel in that situation.
Yeah, I recognize what you're saying from so many people in the civil society sector who, as you said, passionate, quite often like really are maximizers. They want to do everything, and they know there is no financial resources for their job, so they think the only resources is them, and they want to use it and overuse it. And even more the younger professionals who are coming with, you know, even bigger ideals and bigger energy and the desire to prove themselves. So all these criteria that I'm like making them more prone to overwork and burnout. I maybe very pessimistically, I don't know if I have any answer to that. I mean, from my own personal experience, it just took a lot of time to accept that sometimes I just do things like a good enough job, like, and quite often it's also like, I think in our sector we put insanely high standards for ourselves, and I've seen a bit all of the sectors in the bubble, and I still believe that in the NGO sector we really put crazily high standards for ourselves, and accepting that good enough is sufficient. But I would not be able to tell you how do you get there. Like I don't know. It's a very personal process. Maybe we need to have more support system of people just repeating this, saying like, it's fine, good enough is fine. And again, this is very idealistic to say that, because there is also another reality. For example, is that the competition for funding. I mean, when there is a very small success rate for, let's say, EU grants, and therefore, you have to overdo it because you know that you need to be in the top 5% to get funded. So, and that sort of trickles down to all aspects of your work as a manager in an NGO. And I mean, except from, you know, finding huge funders that have, you know, billionaires, left-wing billionaires want to fund the NGO sector in Brussels, and therefore everybody has enough resources. I don't know how to address this, sadly.
So let's advocate for funders to actually give core funding that just supports people for their well-being as well.
I mean, the fight for core funding, I think, I mean, of course, for the impact of that sector beyond just us as, you know, workers, I think is crucial. But I think this would make, I mean, the sort of never-ending chase for project funding is super detrimental to the mental health of everyone in the sector. So more core funding. Sadly, the current climate in institutions doesn't seem that it's going that way in terms of funding for the civil society sector. But I think some of the big NGOs have taken up the fight, and I think it's super important. But yeah.
Thank you for that question, Stephanie. Just if I may add, I think if anybody else feels is it relating to that, then I would also suggest Googling circles of influence, if you've heard of it or not. You know, that we've talked about it before. Might not help immediately, but it also sort of helps a little bit in finding that maybe peace of mind of realizing that there's only a certain amount that you can actually do. We had another question, right? Do we still have time for the one question? Yeah.
You spoke a bit about the role of this kind of middle management. So a lot of people in Brussels bubble, they're great at doing their policy job, their comms job. After 5 years in an organization, they almost automatically get promoted, and then suddenly they're in charge of 4 or 5 people, and they don't have experience on that. So let's say that such a person realizes, and not my case personally, but theoretically, such a person realizes that there is a sort of toxic work environment where you have a very toxic, let's say, senior management. And then you have this middle manager who's basically the only shield protecting the kind of people below that middle manager. So what would be the kind of concrete measures that you would recommend to such a middle manager to take to shield these people below themselves?
I feel I'm being asked questions that are way beyond my competency level, like all sort of issues that are like unsolvable. No, honestly, I don't necessarily have very good answer to that. I think the problem is, like, again, in many people in the bubble who are put in this middle management role, and let's say they have a toxic upper management, especially in the civil society sector, again, their first intuition would be to really be the shield to their people, because they're nice people and they have strong values, they want to protect their people, and that comes at the expense of their own mental health. I think finding support among the other middle managers, if they are, can be very important. I'm trying to think about what advice I can give there, but honestly, this is and I can really see the situation. I can see where this is coming from. I know a lot of people are suffering of this exact situation in the Eurobubble, of being nice, probably fairly good middle managers, maybe lack a bit of training, but they want to do good. But then above them, they have either crazy pressure quantitatively or crazy pressure in terms of absurd micromanagement, and they don't know how to do. Sadly, I don't think there is short-term solution. I mean, this is also why I think we're here. This is why there's more and more of a discussion of there is a crucial need for way more trainings in Brussels about this. And surprisingly, there's not so much of an offer for these trainings. I mean, again, I think because people want to think about their policy topics and not about being good managers. So I think encourage people to follow trainings. But yeah, no, I don't really have a very good advice.
Yeah, great question. But any last questions? Anyone else want to say? I think we can conclude the series, the episode. Thank you again so much, Valentin, for all the great answers and the amazing discussion. Thank you for our audience for participating. And definitely thank you to Coeurtisol and BarBichette for organizing this. Do follow them on Instagram and go listen to the previous episodes if you have not yet. And share with your friends, and let's keep the conversation going. I guess that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you.